Welcome on into another episode of NASCAR Mailbox. I am Jared Haas, and this weekend we're going to take a look back at the action at Charlotte Motor Speedway, answering your questions. And this first question comes from Sydney Kazana. They ask, are they going to give a waiver to Kyle Larson to make the playoffs? A very interesting situation came up with Kyle Larson attempting the double, running the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. And I don't think, first of all, that's not the issue of Kyle Larson trying to run two different series at the same, in the same day. It's been attempted before by John Andretti, Tony Stewart, Robbie Gordon, even more recently Kurt Busch. The issue, I think, pertains of why I don't think Larson should get a waiver is NASCAR bills the Coca-Cola 600 as a crown jewel event. As one of the more important events of the year, this is where they award the most amount of points since there are going to be, an additional stage added on to this race since it's 600 miles. And you had the weather delay at Indianapolis, and Kyle Larson said in an interview, he's going to stay at Indianapolis. That is his primary focus. And he completed that race, tried to come back to Charlotte, and landed right around the time the storms came through. So there was an attempt to come back, but NASCAR, with this charter system, trying to make sure everyone stays on the same page, needs to make sure these teams and drivers show up. And if you let this go, what other things are you going to let go? You could have the lower series that don't pay as much as the Cup Series or even the Xfinity Series, Truck Series drivers that could just say, hey, I could race this event nearby. It's kind of close, but I can hop into the truck last 10 laps of the race. I practiced and qualified, but I still got to race there at that local dirt track and also complete my race in the Truck Series. It opens that Pandora's box of I could skip these races. How much could I skip through and NASCAR still allow it? And I mean, Larson, the tough thing is he kind of proved that the Coca-Cola 600 is not as much of a crown jewel as compared to the Indianapolis 500. If you look at TV ratings when IndyCar and NASCAR go head to head, guess what? NASCAR stomps them out on the ground. It's pathetic numbers for TV for IndyCar. But if you look at the most recent ones, I give it the Kyle Larson bump, but IndyCar beat out NASCAR by a couple million TV viewers. And you look at TV advertisements, NASCAR needs those quite a bit, and they clamor for those type of events. You see why on Fox with those big events like Talladega and Daytona, seems like it's a commercial apocalypse because those commercials are paying quite a bit now. Fox to promote those. And, it didn't really stand out in the TV sense for the NASCAR world. And for such a prestige event, 600 miles has really lost its luster. And Kyle Larson proved it right. And at the expense, the question is the waiver. Does he get a waiver? He entered as a points leader going into Charlotte, had all these playoff points to come in. There is repercussions that could be later in the season of, hey, if he raced at Charlotte, he could have had those points and it could have advanced into the next round. So honestly say that the biggest sticking point on why I say no is a statement that Kyle Larson said that the Indianapolis 500 was more important than the Coca-Cola 600, which was his day job. So honestly, like I said, I wouldn't be too much shocked if NASCAR says, no, you don't get a waiver for skipping the Coca-Cola 600. Even though you made it back, it was more than halfway across the race. Half of the race was done when he arrived, and he was going to take over for Justin Allgaier if the race resumed, but it was a little too late. And now this next question comes from Jersey Guy 8257. They say NASCAR spent 2 hours drying the track for nothing. The decision makers are embarrassing the sport. Now the Coca-Cola 600 kind of ended in a very wet and soggy way with the race being called short of less than 250 laps. And the issue is NASCAR spent time drying the track. It was getting there, but it wasn't fast enough for them to make the decision to call it, which I understand that frustration is there has to be a point of a curfew. Understandably, there's probably local government ordinances in place where, hey, we don't want loud race cars going off at 4 and 5 a.m. while people are still trying to sleep. And drivers, understandably, are not wanting to race at 3 a.m. in the morning, even though we were trying to raid around all day. But there was an attempt, NASCAR has done a good job in the past of saying when there's stuff that's supposed to be a wash, it was a wash. I think of last year's Coca-Cola 600. We didn't wait too long for that announcement. And I think this year's Daytona 500 is another good example. I think that race was delayed pretty much in the afternoon before it really started. We got the fans in there. So the decision was trying to make sure that the track is dry. And it seemed like there's that really tight window, and the humidity seemed to be that big factor where the water wasn't being dried up as much by these air titans. It's a tough situation when you have an outside force of Mother Nature raining on racetracks and you don't have indoor tracks. It's a really stickler of a situation. So I would too, and it seemed like this was a last minute decision that threw off everybody. But this was a decision that just, if this track was going to dry, it had to dry pretty quick, and just one little delay or one pop-up shower, it would have been all over. So understandably frustrated result on that. We've had rain shortened events before. It could have gone in, but by NASCAR rules, if it's more than halfway, the race can be official. And that was the case. So just a tough situation. And I wish it was called sooner if we're going to have that forefront. We saw that rainstorm coming, but they got to make a decision to make sure they don't cancel it too early and be like, oh, wait a minute, here's the track, but also not people hanging around almost there and then canceling it too. So it's that counterbalance of making sure that it's within time reasoning, but it's just a sad thing that nature outside force, NASCAR really can control that. Thank you very much for watching. As always, like and subscribe. That really helps our channel out. And until next time, as always, make sure to have a great race weekend.
Alex Gins for FrontStretch.com. Come back for more great racing content, and if you like us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.